When I picked up the phone to ask my son when his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law looked me right in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Special people. I, who for 3 years had paid their monthly rent of $500, bought every piece of furniture in their house, and filled their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. If you want to know how a 71-year-old woman achieved the perfect revenge against those who betrayed her in the cruelest way, stay until the end of the story. Because what happened next will leave you absolutely speechless. My name is Renata, and I am 71 years old. For 3 years, I lived believing I was being the best mother and mother-in-law in the world. My son Max, 35 years old, and my daughter-in-law Lena lived in a house that I completely supported financially. Picture this. My modest 2-story colonial home with its faded yellow vinyl siding and white shutters that I had painted myself just 2 years prior. The small front porch where I used to sit every evening in my wicker chair, watching for Max's blue Honda Civic to pull into my driveway. My living room, decorated with floral wallpaper that Robert, my late husband, had helped me choose 20 years ago, filled with family photos spanning decades, most of them featuring Max at various stages of his life. Every month, like clockwork, I would drive my aging silver Toyota Camry to First National Bank on Maple Street. I'd wear my navy blue wool coat, the one with the pearl buttons that had been a Christmas gift from Robert before he passed, and march up to the teller window. Mrs. Henderson, who had known me for 15 years, would always greet me with a warm smile as I filled out the transfer slip for exactly $500 to Max and Lena's account. When their refrigerator was empty, and it seemed to be empty more often than not, I would drive to the local grocery store, my reusable canvas bags in hand, wearing my comfortable walking shoes and my favorite lavender cardigan. I'd fill cart after cart with their favorite foods. Lena's organic yogurt that cost 3 times what regular yogurt did, Max's preferred brand of cereal that he'd eaten since childhood, fresh salmon that I could barely afford but knew they enjoyed, and cases of that expensive sparkling water that Lena claimed helped with her anxiety. When they needed furniture, which was surprisingly often for a couple in their 30s, I would accompany them to the furniture stores downtown. I remember the day we bought their living room set, a cream-colored sectional sofa with matching love seat that cost me nearly $1,200. I wore my best dress that day, a dark green number with small white flowers that I saved for special occasions, thinking that helping them create a beautiful home was one of the most important things I could do as a mother. Lena, at 29, was a striking woman with long, straight auburn hair that she kept perfectly styled and nails that were always manicured in whatever color was trendy that month. She had sharp green eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they looked at, and a smile that could charm anyone when she wanted something. She dressed in expensive clothes, brands I recognized from window shopping but could never afford for myself, always looking like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. That particular afternoon I was standing in my living room wearing my everyday clothes, a simple beige blouse tucked into brown slacks, my reading glasses hanging from a chain around my neck, and my house slippers, the comfortable ones with the small holes that I kept meaning to replace but never did because they felt like old friends. There I was, holding my cordless phone with its familiar weight, watching my son avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the very sofa I had purchased for them. The cream-colored sectional looked beautiful in their apartment, but somehow out of place in my more modest home during their visits. Max, my only child, had grown into a tall, lean man with dark hair that was starting to thin at the crown, a trait he'd inherited from his father. He wore a crisp white button-down shirt and dark jeans, clothes that I knew I had indirectly paid for through the monthly allowances I provided. His brown eyes, which used to look at me with such love and gratitude when he was small, now seemed unable to meet mine directly. The pale pink dress I had picked out for Lena's wedding hung uselessly in my bedroom closet upstairs. I had spent hours at Macy's, trying to find something appropriate for a mother-in-law to wear to her son's wedding. The saleswoman, a kind elderly lady named Dorothy, had helped me choose the perfect shade, not too bright to upstage the bride, but elegant enough to show how special the occasion was to me. The dress had cost me $200, money I had carefully saved from my Social Security checks over 2 months. Beside the dress hung the matching shoes, low-heeled pumps in a complementary nude shade that the salesperson assured me would be both comfortable and appropriate. I had even purchased a small clutch purse and had my hair appointment scheduled at Cynthia's salon for the morning of what I thought would be the wedding. But now, as I stood in my living room holding that phone, all those preparations felt like elaborate decorations for a party I was never invited to attend. The afternoon light streaming through my lace curtains illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, and for a moment everything felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold before my eyes. My coffee table, a simple wooden piece that Robert had built with his own hands, held the usual items. My reading glasses case, a small stack of unopened mail, and a ceramic coaster with a faded floral pattern where my morning coffee cup had left its ring. On the mantelpiece above my fireplace sat framed photographs chronicling Max's life. His high school graduation, his college degree ceremony, family Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, a visual timeline of the love and devotion I had poured into raising him alone after Robert's sudden heart attack when Max was just 16. The walls of my living room were painted a warm cream color that I had chosen to make the space feel larger and brighter. Family photos in mismatched frames told the story of our life together. Robert and me on our wedding day, Max taking his first steps, family vacations to the lake, holiday gatherings with my sister Diana and her family from Chicago. But none of those memories could have prepared me for this moment. Standing in my own home, surrounded by the evidence of my love and sacrifice, being told by my daughter-in-law that I wasn't special enough to witness my own son's wedding. The words "special people" echoed in my mind like a death knell, each repetition driving home the devastating realization that despite 3 years of financial sacrifice, despite emptying my late husband's savings account, despite postponing my own dreams and needs, I had somehow failed to earn a place at the most important moment in my only child's life. As I watched Lena adjust her position on the sofa I had bought in the living room I maintained, in the house where I had raised the man she had just married without me, I felt something inside me begin to crack. Not break, not yet, but develop those hairline fractures that would eventually bring down everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my son. The afternoon sun continued to stream through my windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors that Robert and I had refinished together in the early years of our marriage. But the warmth of that light couldn't touch the cold that was beginning to spread through my chest, a chill that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the sudden, devastating clarity that I was nothing more than a financial convenience to the two people I loved most in the world. For weeks leading up to what I believed would be their wedding day, I had meticulously planned every detail of my participation in this momentous occasion. In my bedroom upstairs, tucked safely in the bottom drawer of my antique oak dresser, the same dresser that had belonged to my grandmother, lay an envelope containing exactly $1,000 in crisp $20 bills. I had been saving this money for months, setting aside $20 or $30 from each Social Security check, sometimes skipping my weekly trip to the beauty salon or buying generic brands at the grocery store instead of name brands. The envelope was cream-colored with delicate gold edges, the kind you buy for special occasions. Inside, along with the money, I had written a heartfelt card in my careful cursive handwriting. To my beloved son Max and dear daughter-in-law Lena, may your marriage be filled with all the love and happiness you both deserve. With all my love, Mom. I had spent an entire evening at my kitchen table, trying different versions of the message, wanting it to be perfect. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago 3 times over the past month, each conversation filled with my excitement about the upcoming wedding. Diana, now 75 and living in a cozy apartment near Lincoln Park, had listened patiently as I described my dress, my plans, my joy at finally having a daughter-in-law to welcome into our small family. "Oh, Renata," Diana had said during our last conversation, her voice warm with shared excitement, "I remember how nervous I was at Sarah's wedding. But you've been such a wonderful mother to Max. And you've been so generous with Lena. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful day. I had even offered to help with the catering. Diana," I had told her, "I'm thinking of making my famous apple strudel for the reception. You remember the recipe Mom taught us?" I still have her handwritten cards. We had talked for over an hour about family traditions, about how weddings were meant to bring families together, about how proud Robert would have been to see his son getting married. In preparation for their celebration at my house afterward, Because surely they would want to celebrate with me, their biggest supporter. I had spent 3 entire days cleaning every inch of my home. I had gotten down on my hands and knees to scrub the bathroom tiles, the same white hexagonal tiles that Robert and I had installed ourselves 25 years ago. I had vacuumed under every piece of furniture, dusted every surface, and even washed the windows with vinegar and newspaper the way my mother had taught me. I had polished the silver serving set that Robert's mother had given us as a wedding gift, thinking I might serve coffee and cake when they arrived. The silver had tarnished over the years of storage, but I spent hours with a soft cloth and silver polish, bringing back its original luster. My hands had ached afterward, the arthritis in my joints making the repetitive motions painful, but I had pushed through because I wanted everything to be perfect. All of this, the careful saving, the excited phone calls, the meticulous cleaning, the silver polishing, the dress hanging in my closet, the shoes waiting by the door, all of it collapsed in an instant with those 4 poisonous words. Only special people. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my knees weaken, and I had to grip the back of my floral-patterned armchair, the one Robert used to sit in every evening to read his newspaper, to steady myself. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the very foundation of my understanding had shifted beneath my feet. Max finally lifted his gaze from the floor and looked at me with those brown eyes that had once been so full of love and trust. But now his voice carried a rehearsed quality that made my heart sink even further. "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I knew it the moment the words left his lips. The same way a mother knows when her child is fibbing about broken cookies or unfinished homework. There was something in his tone, something in the way he couldn't quite maintain eye contact, something in the way Lena's lips curved into that satisfied smile. That evening after they had left my house, Max mumbling something about having dinner plans, Lena barely acknowledging my goodbye. I did something I rarely did. I opened Facebook on my old laptop. The computer was slow, a hand-me-down from Max when he had upgraded his own, and it took several minutes to load. But when it finally did, when I navigated to Lena's profile with trembling fingers, what I saw there shattered what remained of my heart. There they were. Dozens of photos from their wedding day. Lena looked radiant in a flowing white gown. Not the simple dress I had envisioned for a courthouse ceremony, but an elaborate creation with lace sleeves and a long train that must have cost thousands of dollars. The dress I had unknowingly helped pay for with that $800 I had given her the previous month for what she had called personal expenses. In photo after photo, I saw Lena's parents beaming with pride as they posed next to the newlyweds. Her father, a distinguished man in an expensive-looking navy suit, had his arm around Lena's shoulders. Her mother, elegant in a lavender dress and matching hat, was dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, tears of joy that I should have been crying myself. I saw Lena's siblings, her younger brother in his military dress uniform, her sister with her 3 young children all dressed in their Sunday best. I saw them raising champagne glasses in elaborate toasts, their faces glowing with happiness and celebration. I saw a professionally decorated reception hall with white linens and elaborate floral centerpieces, orchids and roses that must have cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. But most devastating of all, I saw the joy on their faces. This wasn't the simple, intimate ceremony Max had described. This was a full celebration, complete with a photographer, a wedding cake with multiple tiers, and what appeared to be at least 50 guests. People who were special enough to witness my son's marriage to the woman I had been supporting for 3 years. I scrolled through image after image, each one a knife twist in my already wounded heart. There was Lena cutting the cake with Max's hand over hers. There was Max dancing with Lena's mother. There were group photos of relatives I had never met, friends I had never been introduced to, an entire community of people who had been deemed worthy of sharing this moment. And there was not a single photo, not a single mention, not even a hint that Max had a mother who loved him, who had sacrificed for him, who had been dreaming of this day for months. That night, as I sat in my living room with a laptop still warm on my knees and the glow of the screen casting shadows on the walls Robert had painted so carefully, something fundamental shifted inside me. It wasn't just anger, though anger was certainly there, burning hot and bitter in my chest. It wasn't just hurt, though the pain was so acute I could barely breathe. It was something deeper, something that felt like awakening from a long, drugged sleep. For 71 years, I had been the woman who said yes. Yes to staying up all night when Max had colic as a baby. Yes to working double shifts at the department store to pay for his baseball equipment. Yes to taking out a second mortgage to help with his college tuition. Yes to every request, every emergency, every just this once that had somehow become a way of life. I had been the perfect mother, the accommodating mother-in-law, the silent provider who never questioned, never complained, never asked for anything in return except love. But sitting there in the darkness of my living room, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal glowing on my laptop screen, I realized that what I had been receiving wasn't love at all. It was tolerance. They tolerated my presence because I came with financial benefits. In that moment of crystal clear understanding, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. The desire to put myself first. Not in a selfish way, but in the way that a drowning person finally stops trying to save everyone else and focuses on reaching the surface to breathe. I wanted them to understand that I was a person, not a resource. I was someone with feelings, with dignity, with worth that had nothing to do with the numbers in my bank account. I wanted them to feel, perhaps for the first time, what it was like to lose someone who genuinely cared about their well-being. But more than anything, I wanted to reclaim myself. For too long, I had measured my worth by their satisfaction, their comfort, their approval. I had become addicted to being needed, even when that need was purely financial. I had confused being used with being loved, and the distinction was now painfully, brilliantly clear. I wanted to learn how to say no. Not just to them, but to the voice in my own head that whispered I wasn't worthy of love unless I was giving something away. I wanted to discover who Renata was when she wasn't defined by her function as a provider, a supporter, a financial safety net. Sitting there in my quiet house with the wedding photos still glowing on the screen, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being special only when they needed something. I was done being invisible when they had what they wanted. I was done financing my own exclusion from the family I had spent my entire adult life building and supporting. The woman who had raised a son alone, who had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, who had sacrificed her own dreams to ensure his success. That woman was stronger than the one who had been allowing herself to be used for the past 3 years. It was time to find her again. 1 week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation that had shattered my illusions, my phone rang at 2:47 in the afternoon. I remember the exact time because I was sitting in my kitchen, having just finished a late lunch of tomato soup and crackers, the first meal I had eaten with any appetite since discovering their betrayal. The caller ID showed Lena's number, and for a moment I considered not answering at all. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what possible explanation they might offer, what excuse they might manufacture for excluding me from the most important day of my son's life. When I answered, the voice that greeted me was completely different from the confident, almost triumphant woman who had delivered that crushing blow about special people just a week before. This voice was frantic, desperate, with an underlying tremor that spoke of genuine panic. "Renata," Lena began, and I could hear her trying to control her breathing. "The rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he's going to evict us. You forgot to make the transfer." The audacity of it took my breath away. Not "could you help us," not "we're in trouble," but "you forgot," as if my monthly financial support was as automatic and expected as the sunrise. As if I were simply a malfunctioning ATM that needed to be reminded of its purpose. Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. "We're really scared, Renata. Mr. Davidson came by yesterday and posted a notice on our door. All our neighbors saw it. So embarrassing. We don't know what we're going to do." I remained silent for several long seconds, but not because I was considering helping them. Instead, I was remembering all the times over the past 3 years when I had received similar panicked calls. The time Lena claimed she needed money for an emergency root canal, that I later learned was actually a weekend spa trip with her sister. The time Max called saying their car had broken down and they needed $600 for repairs, only for me to see photos on social media of them at an expensive restaurant that same evening. I remembered the monthly routine that had become as predictable as clockwork. The first of every month, sometimes even a few days early, one of them would call with barely concealed impatience about the rent transfer. Never a thank you for the previous month's payment, never a "how are you doing, Mom?" Just the expectation that I would continue to bankroll their lifestyle indefinitely. I thought about all the times I had cancelled my own plans to rush to the bank. The doctor's appointment I had postponed because Lena needed money for emergency groceries. The lunch date with my sister Diana that I had called off because Max claimed they were short on their electric bill. The small vacation I had been planning to take with a church group, my first trip in 5 years, that I had abandoned because they needed help with unexpected expenses. "Renata." Lena's voice cracked through the phone, pulling me back to the present moment. "Are you there? Please, we really need your help. You know we can't afford to lose this place." The manipulation in her tone was so obvious now, so transparent, that I wondered how I had ever fallen for it. The way she said, "You know we can't afford," as if their inability to support themselves was somehow my responsibility, my failing, my problem to solve. For 3 years I had been their financial safety net, their backup plan, their emergency fund. And yet when it came to celebrating the most important moment in their lives together, I hadn't even warranted an invitation. I was good enough to pay their bills but not good enough to witness their vows. It was then that I made the most liberating decision of my entire 71 years of life. "Lena," I said, and my voice carried a calm that surprised even me. It was the voice of someone who had finally found her footing after years of stumbling in the dark. "Didn't I tell you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so profound, so complete, that for a moment I wondered if the call had been dropped. But then I heard it. The sharp intake of breath, the little gasp of someone who had just realized their safety net had been pulled away. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who was trembling. It was her. "Renata, I don't understand," she stammered, and I could hear the panic rising in her voice. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mother to me. You've always said how much you love us, how important family is to you." Always. Wrapped in that sweet, manipulative voice she only used when she needed something from me. "Like a second mother," I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air between us. "Tell me, Lena, do you exclude your real mother from important family events? Did your parents have to find out about your wedding by seeing photos on Facebook?" That's different," she stuttered. "The wedding was complicated. There were reasons." "The only reason," I interrupted, feeling a strength in my voice that I hadn't heard in years, "was that you didn't think I was special enough to be there. But you think I'm special enough to pay your bills." I could hear her crying now, but they weren't tears of genuine remorse. They were tears of frustration, of desperation, of someone who had just realized their golden goose was no longer laying eggs. "Please, Renata," she begged. "We made a mistake. We can fix this. We can have a reception and invite you. We can make it right." "No," I said simply. "You can't." And with that single word, a word I had been afraid to say for 3 long years, I hung up the phone. That night, after I had disconnected the call that changed everything, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried. But these weren't tears of sadness, as they had been so many times before. These were tears of rage, of accumulated frustration, of years of silent humiliation finally finding their voice. I cried for all the times I had made myself smaller to make them more comfortable. I cried for all the dreams I had deferred to fund their lifestyle. I cried for the foolish woman I had been, the one who had confused being used with being loved, who had believed that my worth was measured by the size of my bank transfers. But most of all, I cried for the mother I had been trying so hard to be, the perfect, understanding, endlessly giving mother, who had somehow lost herself in the process. When I woke up the next morning, something fundamental had shifted inside me. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes as always, the same wrinkles that told stories of decades of worry and sacrifice. But there was something else there now, something I hadn't seen in years. Determination. I got dressed in my most practical clothes. dark slacks, a comfortable sweater, my good walking shoes, and drove straight to First National Bank. Mrs. Henderson greeted me with her usual warm smile, but her expression grew concerned when she saw my face. "Mrs. Richter, is everything all right? You look different today." "Mrs. Henderson," I said, placing my hands firmly on the counter, "I need to cancel all automatic transfers from my account. All of them. Immediately." Her eyes widened. For 3 years, she had processed my monthly transfers to Max and Lena. She had watched my account balance shrink month after month as I funneled my retirement savings into their lives. "Are you sure about this, dear? This is quite a significant change." I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Within an hour, every automatic payment, every scheduled transfer, every financial connection between my account and theirs had been severed. For the first time in 3 years, my money was entirely my own. But that was just the beginning. My next stop was Miller's hardware store on Elm Street. Old Mr. Miller had known me for 20 years, had helped me with countless home improvement projects over the years. "Mrs. Richter, what brings you in today?" "I need to change all the locks on my house, Mr. Miller. Every single one. And I want them to be the best quality you have." If he was surprised by the request, he didn't show it. Within 2 hours, a locksmith was at my house, replacing every lock with high-security deadbolts. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was literally locking out the people who had been taking advantage of my generosity. My final stop that day was at Secure Home Systems, where I arranged for a complete security system to be installed. Cameras, motion sensors, door alarms. Everything I needed to protect myself and my property from future uninvited visits. But even as I took these practical steps to protect myself, I knew that Max and Lena wouldn't give up easily. 3 years of easy money doesn't disappear without a fight. I was right to be concerned. 3 days later, they showed up at my door with reinforcements. A man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase, who introduced himself as Attorney Fisher. They hadn't come to apologize or to acknowledge the pain they had caused me. They had come to try to take legal control of my finances. "Mrs. Richter," Attorney Fisher said in that smooth, condescending tone that lawyers use when they're trying to convince you that your own thoughts aren't valid, "your family is concerned about some recent changes in your behavior. They've asked me to discuss some options that might help ensure your financial security." What they were really trying to do was have me declared mentally incompetent so they could gain legal control over my money. The same people who had excluded me from their wedding because I wasn't special enough now wanted to convince a court that I was too mentally unstable to manage my own affairs. But they had underestimated me. The woman who had raised a son alone, who had worked multiple jobs to support her family, who had managed household finances for decades, that woman was far from incompetent. And she was done being pushed around. The courtroom at the County Family Court building was smaller than I had imagined, with dark wood paneling and fluorescent lights that cast everything in a harsh, clinical glow. I arrived that Tuesday morning at 8:30 a.m., wearing my best navy blue suit, the one I had bought for Robert's funeral 7 years earlier and had rarely worn since. My hands were steady as I carried my leather purse, the same one Robert had given me for our 20th wedding anniversary, containing all the documentation my lawyer had prepared. For 3 grueling hours, I had to prove something that should have been self-evident, that I was in full possession of my mental faculties. That my decision to stop financing Max and Lena's lifestyle was not only rational but necessary for my own well-being and dignity. My attorney, Mr. Weber, a kind man in his 60s who specialized in elder law, presented our case methodically. He displayed bank statements showing the staggering total, $33,400 that I had transferred to them over 3 years. He presented psychiatric evaluations from Dr. Moore, a respected geriatric psychiatrist, who had examined me thoroughly and found my cognitive function to be not just normal, but above average for my age group. "Your Honor," Dr. Moore testified, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses as she spoke, "Mrs. Richter scored in the 95th percentile on all cognitive assessments. Her memory is excellent, her reasoning is sound, and her emotional responses are entirely appropriate to her circumstances. She shows no signs of dementia, depression, or any other condition that would impair her judgment. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from my new friends. Eleanor, my neighbor who had become like a sister to me, and the ladies from the garden club who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. One by one, they took the witness stand and described the woman they had come to know over the past few months. "Mrs. Richter is one of the sharpest, most articulate women I've ever met," testified Eleanor, her voice clear and confident. "She's involved in community activities, she manages her own household, she drives herself everywhere. The idea that she's mentally incompetent is not just wrong, it's absurd." Maria from the garden club added, "I've watched her organize our charity events, balance our budget, and coordinate complex volunteer schedules. She's more capable than most people half her age." When it was my turn to testify, I stood up with all the dignity I could muster and walked to the witness stand. I looked directly at the judge, a woman in her 50s with kind but stern eyes, and told my story in my own words. "Your Honor," I began, "I spent 3 years believing that love meant giving everything I had, even when it left me with nothing. I thought that being a good mother meant sacrificing my own well-being for my son's comfort. But when I wasn't considered special enough to attend my own son's wedding, the wedding I had unknowingly helped finance, I finally understood the difference between being loved and being used." I could see Max and Lena sitting at the plaintiff's table, both of them unable to meet my eyes. Max wore a dark suit that I realized I had probably paid for indirectly, and Lena was dressed in black as if she were attending a funeral. Perhaps, in a way, she was the funeral of their easy money. The judge listened intently as I explained my decision-making process, my financial management over the decades, my current living situation, and my future plans. When opposing counsel tried to suggest that my behavior had been erratic, I calmly explained each action I had taken and why. I changed my locks because my son and daughter-in-law had entered my home without permission and gone through my private documents. I installed a security system because I felt unsafe in my own home. I canceled financial transfers because I chose to stop enabling 2 capable adults who were taking advantage of my generosity. These aren't the actions of someone who's mentally incompetent. They're the actions of someone who's finally learned to protect herself. After both sides had presented their cases, Judge Miller retired to her chambers for what felt like the longest hour of my life. When she returned, her expression was serious but clear. "After reviewing all the evidence presented," she began, "it is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renata Richter is in complete possession of her mental faculties. The psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, however painful they may be for her family, are entirely rational and within her rights as an autonomous adult." My heart began to beat faster as she continued. "Furthermore, the evidence suggests that this petition for guardianship is motivated by financial interest, rather than genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship and finds that Mrs. Richter has every right to manage her own affairs as she sees fit. I had won. Not just the legal battle but something much more important. My freedom, my dignity, my right to live without manipulation and abuse from those who were supposed to love me unconditionally. As we left the courthouse, I saw Max and Lena talking angrily with their attorney. Lena shot me a look of pure hatred before turning away, but Max looked at me one last time. For just a moment, I thought I saw something that might have been regret in his eyes. But it was too late for regret. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. 3 months later, I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. I sold the house where I had raised Max, where Robert and I had been so happy, where I had spent so many years believing that sacrifice was the same as love. The sale brought me enough money to secure my future and fund the life I had always dreamed of but never thought I deserved. I moved to a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment in downtown, on the 15th floor of a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city park. Every morning, I wake up to sunlight streaming through those windows, and I make my coffee in peace, with no one calling to demand money, no emergencies to solve, no one else's needs to put before my own. With half of my newfound wealth, I made donations to 3 organizations that protect elderly people from family financial abuse. I wanted other people in my situation to have the resources and support that I had been fortunate enough to find. The other half, I decided, would be for living, really living, for the first time in years. I took that trip to Europe I had dreamed about for so long. I spent 2 weeks in Tuscany, painting watercolors of the countryside and eating gelato for breakfast if I wanted to. I visited the Louvre in Paris and stood in front of the Mona Lisa, crying tears of joy that I was finally there, finally doing something just for myself. I enrolled in art classes at the community college, something I had wanted to do since I was young but had never had the time or money for. I joined a volunteer group that reads to children at the local library. I learned to play bridge with a group of women who became genuine friends. People who valued my company, not my wallet. I never heard from Max and Lena again. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that they had to move to a much smaller apartment when they couldn't keep up with their rent payments. Lena, who had never held a steady job in the years I knew her, was forced to find employment at a local retail store. Max had to take on extra hours at his job to make ends meet. Perhaps adversity would teach them what my generosity never could. The value of honest work, the importance of independence, and the difference between earning something and expecting it to be handed to you. Some people might say I was too harsh, that families should forgive and support each other no matter what. But I learned something important in my 71 years. Enabling someone's irresponsibility isn't love, it's fear. Fear that if you stop giving, they'll stop pretending to care about you. Real love doesn't come with a price tag. Real family doesn't exclude you from life's most important moments and then expect you to pay for their lifestyle. Real relationships are built on mutual respect, not financial dependency. My name is Renata. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I need to love and protect is myself. I spent decades believing that my worth was measured by what I could give to others. Now I know that my worth comes from who I am, not what I can provide. Every morning when I wake up in my beautiful apartment, looking out at the city below, I'm reminded that it's never too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to say no. It's never too late to choose yourself. And that, I've discovered, is the most liberating lesson of all. What would you do if you were in my position? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share in the comments what stood out to you most in this story. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends who also enjoy stories of justice and personal transformation. There are many more stories waiting for you here on the channel. Until next time.